About sharpening in Photoshop. So the main thing that you want to know is that sharpening is a filter, and the filters in Photoshop are located here in the pull down menu in the application bar. Now when we talk about sharpening, there's a lot of different filters that can sharpen your image, but the one that we are going to be using and professionals use is Smart Sharpen. Now, sharpening is something that is very different in Photoshop than it is for your camera and your lens. If your photograph is out of focus at the point of capture, sharpening in Photoshop will not make it sharp. So to understand this more fully, let's take a look at what sharpening actually does to the pixels in our image. So I'll pick Filter, Sharpen, and then Smart Sharpen here. And if we look at what's happening here with our image, I'm going to max out some of these sliders so that we can conceptually understand how this filter works. It is creating an illusion of sharpness. So I'll max out some of these sliders, the amount slider and the radius slider here in this Smart Sharpen dialog box, and you could see what's happening. Exposure contrast and color contrast is being added locally to pixels that have neighboring pixels of different contrasts. So it's looking at the contours, the edges, where a dark toned pixel meets a bright toned pixel, and it's adding information there, and it's making those edges pop out through contrast. So this is the illusion. This is the filter that's being used when we do these sharpening filters to our image. Now, because of this makes our images look better. And the reason why we sharpen is often because all digital input, meaning turning light into ones and zeros from your camera sensor, writing it on a SD card, and then putting it onto a computer, has a bit of blurriness to it. It's not going to translate the optics in a way that wouldn't benefit from this effect. So sharpening is beneficial and recommended on every single photograph because digital capture at its heart is fallible and every image could benefit from sharpening. So the way that we'll conceptualize sharpening here looking forward is that one, sharpening is used on every single photograph that you process. Two, sharpening is dependent on output. If we're sharpening for an image to be printed, that's a different level of sharpness than a file that is going on the internet, for example. You'll sharpen the higher resolution file more than you would sharpen the lower resolution file. The other thing that we are thinking about with sharpening in terms of the third principle is that we don't want to show that we've sharpened. So there's a moment where these halos start happening and the image looks crunchy, like this image, for example, that we don't want to have happen. And part of that third rule of sharpening, in terms of not going too far, is that not all of the information in our images needs to be sharpened. So for example, in this image, what is in focus benefits from sharpening, but what is out of focus doesn't benefit from sharpening because that information is meant to be a gradient and not have that same definition. So if you learn these three rules about sharpening, you'll be able to effectively improve your images and create that necessary pop that this filter provides.